Killing all of the Dark Souls bosses in alphabetical order was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in a video game, and then it went and got the most views of any video on this channel. My efforts were truly rewarded, and I have all of you to thank, so of course we have to do it all over again in the sequel. So, can you beat all Dark Souls 2 bosses in alphabetical order? Let's find out. Let's go over the rules, but first I want to give a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, Manscaped.com. They sent me an early Christmas present this year, and it's called the New Perfect Package 4.0. Check this out. It's a kit centered around the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. It's waterproof, it's wireless, and it has built-in skin-safe technology. Have you ever nicked your coin purse when using a regular trimmer? I know I have, and it really put me off manscaping in general. But now, with the skin-safe Lawnmower 4.0, it's so much easier to avoid those painful nicks and cuts. It even has a helpful LED light built in so you can see exactly what you're doing at all times. As part of this kit, you'll also get the Crop Preserver Anti-Chafing Ball Deodorant, designed specifically to help you feel fresh, give off a nice scent, and as the name suggests, reduced chafing. Not only that, but you will also receive the Crop Reviver Ball Toner with powerful odor defense, which is perfect if you have plans after a long day at work. Manscaped are even including 2 free gifts for a limited time: a pair of their high-quality anti-chafing boxer briefs designed to reduce friction, and to top it all off, they'll even throw in the premium travel bag for everything called the Shed. It's a perfect size for storage as well. Manscaped really thought of everything. This is the perfect Christmas gift too. My wife is always saying that I'm such a difficult person to buy for, so why not make it easier for our partners and tell them about Manscaped? Plus, if you go to manscaped.com and use our promo code when you order, you will get 20% off plus free international shipping. You can find the promo code on screen or at the very top of this video's description or in the pinned comment below. Thank you for checking out manscaped.com, and thank you Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Back to the rules. Rule number 1, we must defeat every boss in the game in alphabetical order. We will be going by the names of the bosses that appear on screen during the boss fights themselves. Rule number 2, using in-game glitches is fine, just no hacking. And rule number 3, once we defeat the last boss that comes alphabetically, we win. A few things to note: we are playing the Scholar of the First Sin version of the game, and we are playing on the latest patch of the PS4 version. This means that we will be including the bosses from the 3 DLCs as well. This puts the total number of boss fights in this game at 41, and some of them include more than one boss at a time. We will also be starting a brand new game file for this run, and not New Game Plus. First of all, we select a character that starts with an attunement slot, and select the bonfire aesthetic as our starting item. The first boss alphabetically is Aava, the King's Pet. Aava is located within the Ivory King DLC, but we have a lot of preparation to do first. We head out to Majula, and once we collect all the items there, we burn the bonfire aesthetic in Majula to raise Majula up 1 bonfire intensity level. Next, we travel through the Forest of the Fallen Giants, making sure to grab the buckler and farming some souls on the way. We need 12,000 souls to buy a fragrant branch of yore from the merchant hag Melentia. Once we've purchased this, we can talk to her to receive the covetous Silver Serpent Ring +1. This increases our soul gain by 20%. Whilst we're here, we can talk to Kale the Cartographer to receive the Mansion Key. We can find the Sorcerer's Staff behind an illusionary wall shortly after meeting mild-mannered Pate, and then heading through the opening in the wall next to Pate. Once we get past the ballista traps, we can use a lockstone to reveal the Chloranthy Ring to improve our stamina regeneration, and a Titanite slab. One of the good things about Dark Souls 2 is that we can fast travel straight away from any bonfires we've already been to. So we warp back to Majula and use the mansion key to open the Majula mansion. We grab the soul vessel inside, and then we use the fragrant branch of yore to unpetrify Rosabeth of Melfia. and from there we can continue through the Shaded Woods. We make sure to grab every item we see on the way, as we need as many soul items as we can find. Whilst we're here, we light the Ruined Fork Road bonfire. We make sure not to kill the forlorn invader in the Shaded Woods. If we can avoid it, this will be useful later. We need 10,000 souls this time to buy the Moon Butterfly skirt from Morlin, the armourer back in Majula. He only sells this skirt when Majula's bonfire intensity level has been increased to 2. Once we have this skirt, we then kill Morlin the armourer to receive his Seldora clothing. This includes a robe, a cap, trousers, and manchettes. Each of these give us a boost in souls acquired when wearing them, and they stack. Wearing this whole set gives us a total boost of 22.5% soul gain, and this adds on to the 20% soul gain we already have from the Serpent Ring +1. We can use this soul boost to grind even more souls until we have enough to buy the Silver Cat Ring from Sweet Shalquoir for 13,400 souls. We also buy the Poison Mist Pyromancy from Rosabeth of Melfia for 3,400 souls, and the Blacksmith Key from Merchant Hag Melentia for 1,000 souls. Now that we have that key, we also buy Titanite shards to upgrade our rapier to +3. We now need to grind a total of 1 million soul memory. Our soul memory is the accumulative number of souls that we've gained on this character so far. It doesn't matter if we spend those souls during our grind, as long as we've gained 1 million in total. The reason for this grind is to open the Shrine of Winter in the Shaded Woods. Normally, the Shrine of Winter wouldn't open until you defeat all 4 old ones, and those are the Rotten, the Lost Sinner, the Old Iron King, and Duke's Dear Freya. Of course, we can't kill any of those bosses before Aava, but as it happens, the Shrine of Winter will also open after we gain 1 million soul memory. So, before we begin our long grind, we equip the Silver Cat Ring to reduce our fall damage to fall down the pit in Majula to get to the gutter. Here we can find another fragrant branch of yore, a pyromancy flame, and the Dark Fog Hex. We continue through to the Black Gulch and light the bonfire at the end near the Rotten's Fog Gate. We put Poison Mist into our attunement slot, and we equip the Pyromancy Flame to actually use the spell. Now we can drop down to a lower cave entrance. This cave is home to 2 giants. Normally, we would be too underleveled for them, but if we hit them with the Poison Mist enough times, they will eventually die. We just need to make sure to keep our distance as best we can. Killing the 2 giants for the first time will earn us the Forgotten Key. If we run out of Poison Mist uses before killing both, we can ride the cage back up, rest at the bonfire, and do it all over again. This is now our best grinding loop that doesn't involve killing any bosses. If we kill the giants enough times, they will eventually stop respawning. As soon as that happens, we can warp back to Majula, join the Covenant of Champions to keep respawning the giants again. During the grind, we make sure to level up our intelligence to 25 and our faith to 14. This will now allow us to replace Poison Mist with Dark Fog, which has the same poison effect on the giants, but we get more casts of it. We also replace our Pyromancy Flame with the Sorcerer's Staff, since we need a catalyst to use Dark Fog. As part of this grind, we also kill the Dark Sucker enemies each time we pass through on our way to the bonfire. They drop large Titanite shards as their uncommon drop, and Titanite chunks as their rare drop. Considering how many times we'll be running through here on our way to 1 million soul memory, we easily have enough Titanites to upgrade our rapier to +9. And since we already found a Titanite slab earlier, we now have a +10 rapier before killing any bosses. When we finally finish our grind for 1 million soul memory, we can finally open the Shrine of Winter, but we make sure to leave the Covenant of Champions first. Now that the Shrine of Winter is open, we have access to the portal that takes us to the Ivory King DLC. We need an item before the game will let us enter. That item is the Frozen Flower, and it's found beyond the Shrine of Winter and inside Castle Drang Lake, just before the first bonfire. Of course, now that the Shrine of Winter is open, we can go through as normal and enter the castle. Once we have the Frozen Flower, we backtrack to the Ivory King DLC entrance. We are in a fairly high leveled area of the game early on, but with the level ups we gained from the grind, we should be able to play through this area casually until we find the first boss of the area, Aava the King's Pet. This is a tough boss to fight this early on, but with enough patience and help, we're able to take it down. The next boss is Afflicted Graverobber. which is in the Sunken King DLC. This DLC's entrance is beyond the Rotten's boss room in the Black Gulch. But first things first, we need an item to gain access. We warp back to Majula and we use the Forgotten Key to open a door partway down the pit to get an item that we need called a Dragon Talon. But we still need a way of completely skipping the Rotten, and this is where we introduce the game's most useful glitch, the Parry Walk. The Parry Walk glitch basically breaks the game's physics, which also affects the game's gravity. But to make the glitch work, we have the Buckler Shield and the Moon Butterfly Skirt equipped. The Moon Butterfly wings work as well, but the skirt was cheaper. Having this skirt equipped allows us to jump on the spot without a run-up. It also causes poison build-up on enemies in very close proximity. To perform this glitch, we need to parry an enemy and make them fall over backwards. The Buckler has a high number of parry frames, so that's why we use this. Now, before the enemy stands back up, we need to attack and jump at the exact same time in the exact right position. That position is always slightly to one side of the enemy. The easiest way is to walk up to the enemy's feet and then back away slightly diagonally. The distance we need to put between us and the enemy depends on the enemy, as they all have varied hitboxes. As we're backing away, once we're at the right distance, we press the normal attack button and the jump button at the same time. Make sure to keep holding that slight diagonal direction away as we do this, or it won't work. It can be quite tricky at first, but after some practice we can get it fairly consistently. If we get the parry walk successfully, we will jump right over the enemy's body. This happens because we are activating the riposte and the jump on the same frame, and the game isn't quite sure how to handle this. This now activates the glitched state, and its effects are quite interesting. The enemy we parried is now stuck lying on the ground, and the game tries to lock the player's Y coordinates to whatever they were when the parry walk was performed. This means that we can now walk in the air. The game still lets us walk up ramped terrain, but if we walk over an edge, we will zip right back down to that same Y coordinate. We also can't roll or jump during the glitch. However, this glitch will only last 28 seconds. After that, the enemy will get back up again and the game's physics will immediately return to normal. This is due to a patch in the game that checks the state that the enemies are in after being incapacitated. If their incapacitation lasts over 28 seconds, their AI is reset, thus ending the glitch. Breaking the game's gravity like this will be very helpful in this run, but it won't get us by the Rotten. Another effect of the parry walk is that we can store horizontal momentum by sprinting into walls. If we sprint into a wall for several seconds and then activate an animation of some kind, like entering a fog gate for example, then the game will zip the player in the direction that we sprinted and the amount of distance equal to the momentum we gained. But first, we need to find an enemy that we can lure over to the Rotten's fog gate. There are a couple of AI invaders in the Gulch, but unfortunately, they both ended up killing themselves by walking over the edge during our 1 million soul memory grind. There is an NPC in the Gulch called Lucitiel of Mirror. She's hiding in one of the caves, but if we aggro her by hitting her and then luring her as close to the fog as she will go, it is possible to use guard break to push her close to the fog wall. Getting her to attack us at this point was very hit and miss though. Often she just tried to walk away towards where she started. However, if you're playing on console like me, then we can just have a friend invade our world and use them to perform the parry walk. The name engraved ring really helps with this, as it allows our friends to enter our world much more consistently, since this game doesn't have a password feature. Once our friend helps us to activate the parry walk, the 28-second countdown begins. The plan is to store momentum by sprinting into the fog gate at roughly this angle. For the optimal amount of momentum, we don't let our stamina fully deplete. Instead, we stop sprinting and let it almost fill up, and then start sprinting again. Once the 28 seconds is almost up, we quickly enter the fog gate to zip right through the Rotten's boss room before his AI can even activate. Normally, we wouldn't be able to zip through a boss room like this without the boss's AI kicking in, but there is an exception to this rule: bosses with intro cutscenes. Very few bosses have intro cutscenes, but the Rotten does. We need the game to try and load this intro cutscene as we zip through the room, so if we've already activated the cutscene on a failed attempt previously, then we've lost our chance, as the cutscene won't play a second time. If we hit a wall during the zip, the game tends to push us along the wall anyway, and if we hit the exit fog, we'll go straight through. But we need to hit the cancel button as soon as we zip through the exit fog. Doing so will cancel the fog transition animation before it can finish. Failure to cancel this animation in time will cause the boss's intro cutscene to play anyway, which then warps us inside the boss room. When we finally string all of this together, we zip right through the boss room and on the other side, but we absolutely cannot use the bonfire here, as this particular bonfire will warp us away to Majula automatically. We can't warp back here either, so instead we use the Dragon Talon to enter the Sunken King DLC. From here we can either play the DLC casually to get to the boss, or we can use one of the nearby enemies to parry walk from the first bonfire and sprint all the way through the air to the second bonfire. The Afflicted Graverobber isn't far beyond here, but unfortunately it's joined by two other bosses, Ancient Soldier Varg and Cerah the Old Explorer. We must fight all three of them at the same time, but only one of them fits in our alphabetical order right now. I figured that we had two options when it comes to multi-enemy boss fights. Either we consider them as a single boss and go by the first name, or we consider them separate bosses and we can only kill one of them. In the interest of sticking as close to the rules as possible, we chose the latter. So we can only kill Afflicted Graverobber and then we must leave the boss fight, using something like a dark sign to warp back to the last bonfire we used. There are two NPC summons that could help distract the other two bosses whilst we kill the Afflicted Graverobber, although we have to use the black separation crystal to kick the NPCs out of our world before we can use the dark sign. Either that or we can just get ourselves killed. The next boss is Aldia, Scholar of the First Sin, the optional final boss of the entire game. A boss that doesn't even spawn into the game until at least 4 other bosses are dead first. Those 4 bosses being Vendrick, Throne Defender, Throne Watcher, and Nashandra. Needless to say, Aldia is straight up impossible to kill within the alphabetical order. We can't even spawn Aldia without killing the other bosses out of order, so we have no choice but to skip over Aldia and move on to the Ancient Dragon. To reach the Ancient Dragon, we would first need to find a way into Aldia's Keep early. First, we warp to the ruined Fork Road bonfire in the Shaded Woods. We make sure to grab the Chloranthy Ring +1 to replace our old one, and advance our way through the mist to the Shaded Ruins bonfire. From here, we jump out of the opening to the left and use the Fragrant Branch of Yore on the enemy to get it out of our way. Just beyond this is another enemy that we will use a parry walk on. Once we get the parry walk here, we run out and over the edge. There are some invisible walls out here, but we try to force our way in this direction until a different part of the Shaded Woods loads in. We then need to sprint even further beyond the Shaded Woods in this direction. We use the whole 28 seconds to get as far as we can, and when gravity returns to normal, we have made it all the way to Aldia's Keep. We can play through Aldia's Keep casually right up until the boss fog at the end, although this is the Guardian Dragon boss room, and we need to skip this boss. Thankfully, it's easier than the Rotten Skip. We can either light the sconce downstairs to spawn an invader, and then lure it up to the bridge, or have a friend invade us again. One parry walk later and we can run around the whole boss room on the outside, and to the elevator on the other side. We can enter the Dragon Aerie and talk to the Emerald Herald for the Aged Feather. This allows us to warp back to the bonfire we last rested at without losing our souls. Once again, we can play this area casually until we reach the very end. A lot of enemies here are quite tough, but they can also be sprint past if we're fast enough. As we approach the Ancient Dragon, the enemies that were following us will start to back away. We talk to the dragon to receive the Ashen Mist Heart. Just make sure that all the enemies have left the area before attacking the dragon, otherwise they will join in the fight. The dragon is huge and has powerful fire attacks. There is a consistent method to cheese this boss though. If we stand in between his toes on one of his back feet, this will prompt his AI to stomp on us. We can dodge this fairly easily by rolling towards the other back foot. From here, we have time to stab his foot a few times whilst the dragon puts his first foot back in place. We can rinse repeat this method over and over, taking it in turns with each foot until it's dead. Just make sure to be positioned between its toes when it attacks, otherwise it might break out an AoE fire attack. If that happens, our best bet is to sprint under its tail to avoid the fire damage, and then quickly get back in position to carry on with the foot stabbing routine. Just remember, as soon as it dies, the enemies that chased us before will bum rush us all at once. But we can use the Aged Feather to escape easily though. Next up is the Ancient Soldier Varg, another member of the gank squad that we fought before. The routine is the same though, the NPC summons can distract the other two. The third guy with the bow and arrow is starting to get very annoying though. Once the Ancient Soldier is dead, we can banish any summon that's still alive, and then we use the Aged Feather to escape. We now need to get to the Belfry Gargoyles in the Lost Bastille. There are two ways to get to the Lost Bastille. We either kill the Flexile Sentry in No Man's Wharf, or we kill the Pursuer in the Forest of the Fallen Giants. Each method will affect which part of the Lost Bastille we start at, but of course, we don't want to kill either of those two bosses yet. We want to enter the Lost Bastille at the Tower Apart bonfire, and normally this would mean killing the Pursuer. So not only do we need to skip the Pursuer, but we need to skip the door that leads to the Pursuer Fog Gate, since it doesn't normally open until after we kill the last giant. We can use Parry Walk here off either a Hollow or an Invader, and sprint against this short ladder for a few seconds. We need to make sure we're not sprinting for too long though, as it's quite easy to overshoot where we want to zip to. As soon as we've sprinted enough, we grab the ladder to start an animation, which then causes us to zip in the direction that we sprinted, just like with the Rotten Skip. After we get the zip, we're still holding on to an invisible ladder. We can climb either up or down, and the ladder's length will match that of the ladder we grabbed to get the zip. If we climb to the top or bottom, we will still be floating in the air if the parry walk is still active, otherwise we just fall. We failed this zip many times as it's very easy to misjudge the distance since the area isn't loaded, but once we get it right, we can fall off the ladder and land behind the locked door. Now we can go upstairs and to the Pursuer's Fog Gate. As it happens, there is a Hollow right here, and he's going to help us get another parry walk. Once we get it, we can run through the sky and all the way around the Pursuer's boss room. This is also why it's useful to have the Chloranthy Ring +1 at this point to increase our stamina regeneration to ensure we can sprint for as long as possible to get out of the air and to safety before the 28 seconds is up. Once we're on the other side, we have the bird carriers to the Lost Bastille. We start at the Tower Apart bonfire, but we still can't get to the Belfry Gargoyles by normal means. We can get to this window to find a hollow overlooking the room inside. We need to use him for a parry walk, and as soon as we get it, we must run to the other side of the room and into the slightly sloped ledge near the ladder. The game allows us to get up this slope during the parry walk, and now we need to sprint directly into the ladder for a few seconds to build some momentum. We can't use the full 28 seconds here though, as we still need some of the parry walk time to be active after the zip. After grabbing the ladder, we zip ahead in midair. We very quickly climb the ladder to the top and then use our remaining time to sprint towards the circular structure ahead. We have just enough height to get onto the ledge behind that structure. Of course, we need to do all of that within 28 seconds or we will just fall out of the sky. This ledge is right where the Belfry Gargoyle boss fight takes place. The boss's AI will not be active, but it will activate as soon as we go near the fog gate, so we make sure to equip ourselves properly first. We usually unequip our weapon during parry walk setups just in case we accidentally riposte the enemy, and that way the enemy won't die prematurely before we get the parry walk. With how much we've grinded our character though, the gargoyles go down very easily. Now we warp back to the Ivory King DLC as our next boss is the Burnt Ivory King. We can access this boss normally as we've already beaten Aava, the king's pet, but first we defrost all the ice in the DLC. This allows us to explore more areas within the DLC, which gives us access to some decent items. One item that we want is the Soul Vessel just before the second bonfire. This is the second Soul Vessel we've picked up now, and they will allow us to reallocate our character's stats, which will be important later. We can now also rescue all 4 Lois Knights locked up in their various parts of the DLC, and they will assist us in the boss fight. Otherwise, we'll get completely outnumbered as the Burnt Ivory King has a few friends. It's an epic battle, but teamwork sees us through to the end, and the Ivory King goes down. Next up is the third member of the gank squad, Cerah the Old Explorer. We walk back there and the routine is the same as before. Have the summons distract the other two and we finally take our revenge on the archer. As usual, we warp out quickly before the other two bosses can die. Our next boss is Congregation, which is a boss that is joined by Prowling Magus. But to even get to this boss, we need to skip Scorpioness Najka first. There's no way to get around Najka, so the only way we can skip this boss is to use a zip again, just like we did with the Rotten. But Najka doesn't have an intro cutscene like the Rotten does, so the zip won't work normally. However, there is a way we can make the zip work without needing an intro cutscene. We need to trick the game into thinking that we're already in a boss fight before the zip. This is done by getting a parry walk and then positioning ourselves so that we're facing to the side of the boss fog gate. Entering a fog gate like this won't turn our character to face towards the fog, and we will walk whichever way we're facing. If we're positioned perfectly, we can get halfway through the fog gate and quickly escape before the fog traps us inside. If we get just far enough inside, the boss fight is activated and the boss's health bar will appear on screen. This is how you know it worked. After that, we need to travel all the way to Scorpioness Najka's fog gate in the Shaded Woods. However, we cannot warp there, as this will deactivate the glitched state we're currently in. This means we must enter this glitched state on a boss fog that we can then walk from to get to the Shaded Woods. The two that we tried in this run were the Dragon Riders in Castle Drang Lake and the Last Giant in the Forest of the Fallen Giants. Something to note, if we are doing this glitch with the Last Giant boss fog, we have to enter it first to activate his intro cutscene and then warp out again before performing the glitch. Otherwise, the intro cutscene will cause this glitch not to work. Sometimes if we have an invader in our world, performing this glitch won't kick them out. All the enemies in the area will now be deloaded on the host's screen, but the invader can still see all of the enemies on their screen. They will even attack the host to no effect. If this happens, the invader will need to kill themselves though to allow us to leave the area we're in. We can make our way to the Shaded Woods from either of the fog gates we mentioned without needing to fast travel. Note that you can still rest at bonfires during this glitched state to recover HP and respawn enemies, you just can't warp. On our way to the Shaded Woods, once we leave the area that we activated the glitch, the boss's HP would immediately rocket down to 0. This is likely due to the ground deloading below the boss's feet and it falling to its death. However, since we've not officially entered the boss room, this won't count as the boss dying. Now we need to perform another parry walk to zip through Najka's boss room. But there's one problem. In this glitched state, we cannot manually summon invaders into our world. The game simply does not allow it. The best way around this is to use the forlorn invader that invades us in the misty area of the Shaded Woods. This is why we wanted to keep him alive earlier. It's important that we use an invader for this and not a random hollow in the Shaded Woods. The reason for this is that the hollows won't aggro up the hill towards Najka's fog gate. As soon as they get to the bottom of the hill, they start walking back to their default position. In theory, we could get the parry walk at the bottom of the hill using a hollow and then sprint up the hill. But because we travel far enough away from the original position where we parried the hollow, the previous area deloads and this deactivates the parry walk. Since the parry walk is ended prematurely before the 28 seconds, we would never have enough time to zip through Najka's boss room. The benefit with an invader is that he will follow us to the ends of the earth, and that includes all the way to the hill before Najka's boss room. The Forlorn's AI also won't reset if we run up the hill after getting the parry walk, so as soon as we get the parry walk from Forlorn, we sprint up the hill and then sprint into Najka's fog gate at this angle on the right side. Because our Y coordinate is now so much higher than it was when we parry walked, the game is trying to push us down, which means sprinting into this wall like this won't push us up the wall like it would otherwise. After building enough momentum, we enter the fog gate and we are able to zip right through Najka's boss room and through the exit fog on the other side. Being in the glitched state with the other boss's health bar on screen prevents Najka from aggroing towards us, which is exactly what we want. Getting the angle right on the zip is tricky as the terrain can mess us up easily, but when it works, it looks like this. The victory achieved message will appear on the screen, but none of the bosses involved actually died during this. Just note that if we don't have the glitched state when doing this zip, the next area beyond the boss room just does not load, and quitting out and reloading the game here will put us right back before Najka's boss fog again. The boss of the area beyond here, the Doors of Pharos, is completely optional, and we can travel right through this area casually whilst completely ignoring the boss. Now we enter Brightstone Cove Seldora, Explorer and enter the boss fight against both the Prowling Magus and Congregation. Congregation is made up of several enemies that share one health bar, but we need to make sure we don't kill Prowling Magus. As soon as Congregation is dead, we use the Aged Feather to escape. The next boss on the list is the Covetous Demon, but to get to that boss, we need to open a way to the Huntsman's Copse. To do that, we need to meet Cerah of Lindelt, an NPC which is found at the end of Hyde's Tower of Flame. To meet her, we need to get by the Dragon Rider boss, which is thankfully quite easy. Just one parry walk on one of the Hyde Knights sitting around is enough to run through the air and to the back of the Dragon Rider's boss room. Now we can talk to Cerah of Lindelt. Just make sure to take off our skirt first or the poison damage will aggro her. We warp to Majula and have Cerah open the way to the Huntsman's Copse. Now that we're here, we need a way to skip the Skeleton Lord's boss fight, and as usual, the parry walk is the answer. Most of the way through the copse there is an invader called Merciless Rowena. We want to use her for a parry walk. Just make sure not to land over the edge on the jump or we'll be stuck like this in midair. It's best to have the Chloranthy Ring +1 equipped for this parry walk to improve our stamina regeneration, which will allow us to cover more distance in this 28 seconds. Once we get the parry walk, we sprint this way and to the left wall, which allows us to just make it over. Now we sprint over to the right slightly towards the other side of the area behind the Skeleton Lord boss. It's a bit difficult to tell where we are as there are some invisible walls in our way, but with some trial and error, we're finally able to land on solid ground just as the 28 seconds run out. From here, we can advance through Harvest Valley and the Earthen Peak casually until we get to the Covetous Demon. With how much we've overleveled, these earlier bosses pose very little threat. Now to find the Darklurker, but to do that, we need to meet an NPC in 3 locations first. That NPC is Dark Diver Grandal, and fortunately, we already have access to all 3 of his locations. We first find him in the Shaded Woods in a pit, where we will also join his covenant. Then we can find him over the edge behind a hidden door in the Black Gulch. That door needs the forgotten key dropped by the Gulch Giants, and considering we used them to grind, we definitely already have that key. The last place we find him is Castle Drang Lake in another pit. Once we find him all 3 times, we can now offer him a humanity at each of the 3 locations to open 3 small dungeons. We need to light a sconce within each of the 3 dungeons, so make sure we have some flame butterflies handy to light our torch. The enemies within each of these 3 dungeons will also need defeating before we can complete them. Some of these enemies can be quite tough, but they can also be cheesed if needed. It's when we finish the 3rd dungeon, regardless of the order we do them in, that we fight the Darklurker. It can be a challenging fight on our own, especially when it splits into 2, but it also happens to be weak to lightning damage. That makes our next boss the Demon of Song, located in the Shrine of Amana. But normally we can't get there without killing the Dragon Rider duo and the Looking Glass Knight at the end of Castle Drang Lake. At least we have access to Castle Drang Lake already. First, we need to reveal the hidden bonfire at the bottom of a ladder before the Dragon Rider's duo Foggate. There happens to be a statue that comes to life down here, and we want to use it for a parry walk. As soon as we get that parry walk, we sprint into the wall next to the ladder to build momentum, and after bang on sprinting for 20 seconds, we grab the ladder and zip out of bounds. From there, we climb the invisible ladder to the top, and if we timed it right, we will clip inside the very corridor immediately after the Dragon Riders. We light the bonfire here and play the rest of Castle Drang Lake casually until we reach the Looking Glass Knight Foggate. We need to use another parry walk here, but it needs to be as close to this ladder as possible. The ladder is a fair distance away from the Foggate, but it's the only way. Whereas it is possible to guard break one of the statue enemies before the fog all the way to this ladder, it's much easier to summon an invader friend again. We need to perform the parry walk and then immediately sprint against the wall to the side of the ladder. We need to utilize the entire 28-second time limit before grabbing that ladder. Unfortunately, even if we are as efficient as possible with our stamina for the full 28 seconds during the sprint, the momentum still isn't quite enough. we end up warped on an invisible ladder above the boss room itself. We either climb down to start the boss fight, or to the very top, only to fall to our death. It is possible to climb to the top of this invisible ladder and then very quickly jump before we fall, but unless we can get closer to the end fog gate, all we do is die from the fall damage, regardless if we have the silver cat ring equipped or not. If we want to get closer, we need a way to increase the momentum we get on the zip, and the best way to do that is to increase our maximum stamina. We already have the Chloranthy Ring +1 equipped to increase our stamina recovery speed by 20%, which does help, but it's not enough. We want to also boost our endurance stat, so we warp back to the things betwixt, hand over our first soul vessel to Strohan, and respec our levels into different stats. We go all out with 99 endurance. Now we can sprint against the wall for longer bursts before having to stop and recover stamina, but even then it's quite difficult to get enough momentum on the zip to fully skip this boss room. Even using equipment to boost our stamina recovery further, like shields, didn't seem to help due to limitations on how the same buffs stack in this game. So we decided to go the extra mile. We want the Chloranthy Ring +2, but the only way to get this is to defeat a boss called Executioner Chariot in New Game Plus. As luck would have it, my wife, Gina, completed her first playthrough of Dark Souls 2 recently on our Twitch channel.
Ooh, why is it like that?
What?
What was that?
That was the giddiest run to do a murder I've ever seen.
Oh, I love me a murder.
So all we had to do was have Gina defeat the Chariot on New Game Plus on her account, get the Chloranthy Ring +2, summon Gina into our world, have Gina drop the Chloranthy Ring +2 for us. This improves our stamina recovery rate from 20% to 25%. With that ring and 99 endurance, we were able to build enough momentum on the zip that we completely skipped over the Looking Glass Knight boss room, and we ended up on the other side. We enter the Shrine of Amana, light the first bonfire, warp back to the things betwixt, hand over our second soul vessel, and put our stats back to how they were. Now we can play through the Shrine of Amana casually until we encounter the rather easy boss, Demon of Song. The Dragon Rider is next, and this is no issue at all. We warp back to the Hyde's Tower of Flame and take it down no problem. Then we can warp back to Castle Drang Lake and take down the two Dragon Riders together who share the same name. This brings us to Elana, the Squalid Queen, who is at the end of the Sunken King DLC. So we need to play to the very end of that DLC first. Thankfully there are no mandatory bosses blocking our way, so we make the long journey down and we defeat her. After that we need to get to the Executioner's Chariot, so we warp to the Huntsman's Copse, cross the bridge, kill the invader and take down the chariot. The Flexile Sentry is up next, and all we have to do is warp to the end of the Hyde's Tower of Flame, travel through No Man's Wharf casually, and then defeat the now very easily Flexile Sentry. That brings us to the Fume Knight, which is located right at the end of the Old Iron King DLC, but the first challenge is accessing the DLC in the first place. We would normally need to defeat the Old Iron King at the end of the Iron Keep, but to even get to the Iron Keep we would normally need to defeat Mytha, the Baneful Queen, in the Earthen Peak. But first things first, let's make our way through the Earthen Peak casually and use a torch to burn the windmill, which removes the poison pool before Mytha's boss room. Since there's no way to skip Mytha by going around her boss room, we'll have to zip through it. We light the hidden bonfire above Mytha's fog gate, and now we use one of the enemies below to get a parry walk. Since Mytha's boss encounter doesn't start with a cutscene, we need to use the same glitched method as we did with Scorpioness Najka. So we use our first parry walk to get the boss glitch, where we only go through the fog gate halfway to activate the boss fight without being inside the room. We then go back to the bonfire above the fog gate to rest, and then perform the parry walk again, only now we use momentum to zip through Mytha's boss room in a straight line. This gives us access to the Iron Keep. The end of the Iron Keep is surrounded by lava, but we don't need to travel through the Iron Keep itself to get there. Straight away we see an enemy on a bridge. We want to parry walk from that enemy, but we need to make sure that we land on top of the bridge's railing on the right side of the bridge. This is to give us that little bit of extra height when running through the air. Now we can run on above the lava and through this wall that does not have solid collision, and in the distance we can see right where we need to land. It is easily indicated by a treasure chest. If we didn't land on the railing off the parry walk for that extra height, we would have struggled to get on top of this ledge, but with that added height we get above it and we drop in once the 28 seconds are up. This skips the old Iron King boss, and with the heavy iron key that we got earlier, we can access the old Iron King DLC. From here, the path to the Fume Knight is a difficult one, but it doesn't require any skips as we just need to beat the DLC casually. On our way through the Broom Tower, we also grab the tower key, which will be useful later. Once we reach the end, we destroy as many of the Smelter statues as we can and put the Fume Knight down. Next, we need to get to the Giant Lord located in the Memory of Jay. We're able to enter memories thanks to the Ashen Mist Heart that we got from the Ancient Dragon, but it's intended that we also get to Vendrick before we can open the King Gates. There is a King Gate blocking the entrance to the Memory of Jay in the Forest of the Fallen Giants, but one parry walk is all that's needed to bypass this. It's also possible to just jump to the entrance thanks to the skirt we're wearing, and from there we can enter the memory as normal and defeat the Giant Lord. This will also award us a Giant Soul. Keep hold of these. The Guardian Dragon is our next victim, so we just warp back to Aldia's Keep and go straight for the boss. The same goes for the Looking Glass Knight after that. We can just warp to Castle Dranglake and head straight for the boss and defeat it. This brings us to Lud, the King's Pet, located in the Ivory King DLC, the same DLC where we fought our first boss Aava, the King's Pet, only Lud is a bit more hidden away. There is a locked gate in the DLC that requires a key. The key is hidden behind a rock gate that only opens if we light the 4 sconces by the gate, and we can only light those sconces if the blizzard has stopped. Thankfully, we've already been to the end of this DLC, so the blizzard has now stopped. We can get the key and open the gate with it. It's also possible to use a parry walk to walk through the air and around the gate without needing the key. Now we can travel to the frigid outskirts and make our way towards the boss fight. This area is horrible, as we get attacked by frozen reindeer in the heavy blizzard. So we travel through with a few summons in tow. This helps us to reach Lud the King's Pet, but he isn't alone. He is joined by Zallen the King's Pet. Of course, we only want to kill Lud in this fight and not Zallen. Fortunately, Lud attacks first in this boss fight, so we can spend the very start of the boss fight getting as much damage on Lud as possible before Zallen joins the fray. Once Zallen does join the fight, he can get distracted by our summons, which allows us to focus damage on Lud to make sure that he dies first. As soon as Lud falls, we need to very quickly banish our summons with the Black Separation Crystal and then warp out with the Aged Feather before Zallen can hit us. And not a moment too soon. This is why we make sure to equip these items in our hotbar for faster use, and even then it was very close. A nice easy boss next, Mytha the Baneful Queen. We simply warp back to the Earthen Peak and destroy her easily. After that we have Nashandra, the original final boss of the game before they added Aldia. We mentioned that Aldia doesn't spawn until 4 other bosses are dead first. Well, we have the same problem with Nashandra. It doesn't spawn until the Throne Defender and the Throne Watcher are defeated. Unfortunately, just like Aldia, that means beating Nashandra within the alphabetical order is impossible, which means we have now had to skip 2 bosses in total. At least the next boss is an easy one, Old Dragonslayer, located in Hyde's Tower of Flame. And since this is now an early area, both the dragon guarding the boss room and the boss itself go down very easily. Next up is the Old Iron King, and if we haven't already made our way through the Iron Keep, we will need to do so now. We can't light the second bonfire in the Iron Keep yet though, since that requires us to defeat the Smelter Demon, so we'll have to make do without it. Other than that, we play through casually and defeat the Old Iron King. It's finally time to return to Brightstone Cove Seldora and take down Prowling Magus. Of course, we need to avoid killing the congregation this time, and then we use the H-Feather to escape as soon as Prowling Magus is dead. Now it's the 2 Royal Rat bosses, one after the other, starting with Royal Rat Authority. We warp back to the Doors of Pharos and casually defeat the giant rat boss. After that, it's the Royal Rat Vanguard, so we warp back to Majula and make our way down the pit again, only this time we want to land on a ledge part way down. We enter the cave and it isn't long before we find the fog gate we're looking looking for. We're swarmed by a horde of rats, but as soon as we find the one we're looking for, we put it down and send the rest of the rats scurrying away. This brings us to the ruined Sentinels in the Lost Bastille, so we return there and play through the area as normal. There are 3 ruined Sentinels all in one boss fight, but since their names all start with the words ruined Sentinel, we can kill them all in this one fight. We just need to make sure to kill them in the correct order, as they do have their own individual names. In order, they are Alessia, Reese, and Yahim. So that is the order we must kill them. As soon as we enter the boss room, only Yahim is to be found. So we jump down to the lower floor to spawn the other 2, and from there, we can defeat them in order. The game even lists their health bars alphabetically in order on screen for us. Then we return to Scorpioness Najka in the Shaded Woods to finally kill her. A nice easy boss before the next one, because afterwards, it's Sinh the Slumbering Dragon. Since we've already killed Elana the Squalid Queen, we have access to Sinh straight away. As always, Sinh is a challenge, but after breaking 2 fully upgraded weapons on it, we finally defeated it. We must return to Broom Tower in the old Iron King DLC, as our next boss is Sir Alonne. There is a door we couldn't open before, but now we can as we have the tower key. Through here, we see a ridiculous number of invaders, but we quickly enter through another memory to put us on the path to Sir Alonne. It's a treacherous path with an even more treacherous boss fight, but thanks to a couple of NPC summons, we're finally able to put him out of his misery. The Skeleton Lords are our next victims. We warp back to the Huntsman's Copse and defeat them easily. The same goes for the Smelter Demon. We simply warp back to the Iron Keep and kill it. That brings us to the Blue Smelter Demon, or at least that's what people call it. Its name is actually just Smelter Demon. It's just blue and a lot stronger this time. It's located in the dark passage beyond Broom Tower in the Iron King DLC, but as long as we have the tower key, we can access this area. This stronger version of the Smelter Demon is tough. We make sure to prepare ourselves with its weaknesses like poison and thrusting weapons, and eventually it goes down like the previous one. The next 5 bosses all officially have the word "the" at the start of their names, and the first one of these is the Duke's Dear Freja. To get to this boss, we must get by the Prowling Magus and Congregation boss fight. Of course, we've already killed both of these, but not at the same time in the same fight, which means, regardless of our rules, the game still considers them both alive. This means at the start of Brightstone Cove Seldora, we need to use one of the hollows to parry walk our way through the air. We run towards the other side of the church so that we can land on the other side. It's then we realise how high up we were, so we quickly equip the Silver Cat Ring to reduce our fall damage before the 28 seconds were up. After surviving that fall, we can travel through the rest of the area casually and face off against the Duke's Dear Freja. Now we finally get to take on the game's first boss, or at least it would have been the first boss in a casual playthrough, the Last Giant. We just warp to the Forest of the Fallen Giants, and instead of using his fog gate to trigger glitches, we just go in there and kill him instead. We want to get to the Lost Sinner now, so we warp back to the Lost Bastille where we fought the 3 Sentinels, and we travel through to the Sinner's Rise. We make sure to grab the Bastille key on the way, then we wade our way through some water, and burn the oil on both sides of the boss room for good measure. This makes defeating the Lost Sinner much easier. Now we want to kill the pursuer instead of skipping it. And now that we have defeated the Last Giant, we now have the key that we need to get to the pursuer in the intended way. I just had to use the ballista to kill it though, it was far too tempting not to. We find ourselves back in the Black Gulch, as we now need to kill the Rotten. The last time the Rotten saw us, we were zipping through his room, so he'll be glad to know that we're stopping by to kill him this time. This puts us on the duo of Throne Defender and Throne Watcher, but we need to get to this boss first, as it's located in the Throne of Want. This is the final area of the game, but to get here it's intended that we equip the King's Ring to open the King Gate. We don't have that ring yet since we haven't reached Vendrick, so we'll just have to use another parry walk. Right at the entrance to Castle Drang Lake, we head to the right and use a hollow here to start a parry walk. We then need to run through the air around the castle, making sure to follow the path that we're taking in this video, as the exact spot we're looking for can be a little bit precise. Once we're in the right place, the 28 seconds are up and we land right in the Throne of Want on the other side of the King's Gate. You can see how close we were to missing the landing. With that, we can head to the boss fight at the end against both the Throne Defender and the Throne Watcher. We can beat them both from here as their names follow each other alphabetically. We just need to make sure we kill the Defender before the Watcher. Now we need to make sure we kill the Watcher quickly after the Defender, otherwise the Watcher will revive the Defender. If the Watcher died after reviving the Defender, then I don't know what that would mean for our rules, but thankfully we don't need to think about that as we kill the Watcher in time. As soon as they're both dead, we are thrust straight into the final boss against Nashandra. This is the boss that we mentioned that we couldn't kill in alphabetical order back when we were on the letter N, all because of the Throne duo having to be killed first. So instead of fighting Nashandra, we use an Age Feather to escape. The next boss is Velstadt, the Royal Aegis. So we warp to the Shrine of Amana and play through casually until we reach the Undead Crypt, and then we can play through the Undead Crypt casually to reach Velstadt with no problem. Immediately following Velstadt, we find Vendrick, and he also happens to be the next boss alphabetically. Vendrick is often referred to as King Vendrick in this game, but in battle his name is just Vendrick, so he's in the V's as far as I'm concerned. He won't aggro to us unless we strike first, but there's something we want to do first. We want to collect as many giant souls as we can, as the more giant souls we have, the weaker Vendrick becomes. There are 5 giant souls in total, and we already have 3 of them. One from killing the ancient dragon, one from killing the giant lord in the memory of Jay, and one from killing the 2 underground giants in the Black Gulch. We can get the other 2 by visiting the memory of Oro and the memory of Vamar in the Forest of the Fallen Giants. Once we enter each memory, we have a limited time to reach the end, but once we do, we find a giant soul waiting for us. Now we have all 5 giant souls. We challenge Vendrick by attacking him, and he is now very manageable in his weakened state. This leaves what is quite possibly the most awkward boss for last, Zallen the King's Pet, in the Ivory King DLC. This is the boss that appeared alongside Lud earlier when we were in the letter L's. So once again we must cross the very annoying frigid outskirts, fend off the frozen reindeer attacks, and what makes this boss fight even more awkward is that Lud starts the fight, so we must survive until Zallen joins the fight. Fortunately, it didn't take long. We quickly focus as much damage as we could on Zallen with our summons distracting Lud. As soon as Zallen is defeated, we quickly banish our summons one at a time and use the Aged Feather to escape. We have done it! Can you beat all Dark Souls 2 bosses in alphabetical order? No, afraid not. But I actually don't mind so much this time around. Out of the total 41 boss fights in this game, the only 2 that we couldn't kill in alphabetical order were Aldia and Nashandra. Not only are these the final 2 bosses in the entire game anyway, but they simply don't spawn into the game until other bosses have been defeated first. This means that I feel that we did absolutely everything we possibly could given the rules, and since we're treating every boss enemy individually, this actually means our total was 47 out of 49 bosses, which sounds just a bit more impressive. A big thank you to the members of the Dark Souls Speedrun Discord server for their information and advice, and a big thank you to all of you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, there's plenty more just like it on this very channel. All you have to do is subscribe, and you can even follow our Twitch channel to see these runs being performed live. And finally, please join our Discord server if you ever want to speak to me directly. I'm there every day. Speaking of Twitch though, I have to thank all of our Twitch subscribers in alphabetical order, of course. They are A Lazy Dragon, Argo Suis, Crawling Relsa, Davs Brander, D Stut, Duncan F93, Evolve Pixel, Finn Living with a Ghost, Goated Gal, Hacky Joey 14, John Fitz 49, Judy Poody, Lacerated Hunter, Lit Game 83, Mad King Cryptid, Major Vengeance, Miss Barbs, Mr. Griff, Nerd Paladin, Platonic Penguin, Cyvel, Scouting Nate, Static Jokes, That Chloe is Odd, The Overachiever, The Bloody Screen, Tim Zero, Toaster Ovenses, and True DK0. And of course a big thank you to our patrons as well, A Lazy Dragon and Anthony Kermack. You couple of beauties you. If you haven't watched our Dark Souls 1 all bosses in alphabetical order video yet, then it's linked on screen now. Or maybe you want to see some Metal Gear Solid challenge runs where we're not allowed to take any steps. Well, it just so happens I have the perfect playlist for you.